The Marinade.
There's no O in Marinade. Let's try it one more time. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
The Marinade.
Marinade.
Bone marinade. The
That's
Marinade.
The Marinade. With Jason Earle.
A monk lights himself on fire in Vietnam. I'm watching our first black and white television. A monk burns himself to death in Vietnam, and I get the American
Welcome
blues.
to The Marinade with Jason Earle, a free-flowing conversation about the creative process with creative people. This is episode 95, and our guest is Nathan Bell. Nathan Bell is a singer and songwriter whose latest record, Red, White, and American Blues, It Can Happen Here, is available everywhere. Red, White, and American Blues is a powerhouse record, y'all. I was so excited to have this conversation, and we ended up covering a ton of ground. I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity and so excited for y'all to hear this one. Everyone, my conversation with Nathan Bell.
Is that better?
I think that's better. That's better. Is that better? Is that better? Yeah, that's better.
It's Bitcoin.
It's Bitcoin that caused the
Yeah,
problem.
you're being sabotaged by the Bitcoin. What the guy called them cosplay libertarians.
I didn't hear that.
Yeah, it was in my favorite news source, The Guardian, today, and I about went on the ground. I thought, man, that's as good as it gets.
That's so funny. I did see some headline about Bitcoin, so that's probably it. Like
Good article too, because it's sort of, the article is sort of wistful. It's like, well, this is going to be around no matter what we do, but Jesus, right?
yeah. Well, some things it's, I think I don't have as much of a problem accepting that one. You know, I'm like, fuck, it's gonna be around, I guess. But you know, there's some things that I'm worried about being around, like fascism, that you dive into quite a bit on this record. That's one.
It's a nice segue.
About. Yeah, perfect segue into the record. And before when we had to cut off there, we were talking about just how some of these songs kind of came along, post 2015 or during that time. And some of them, I mean, when I think about 2019, when they were recorded, and I think about like what it did for me was it forced me to think about the tension that was in the air at that moment. And not that things are chill now, but like the tension you capture, The record captures the tension of the moment so intensely.
I appreciate that, man. I don't know if it was intentional, but it's certainly because of the material and when it was recorded and what was going on. And the sound of it. I got to give Frank Swart credit for this. I said to him, you're not going to be able to recreate the sound of it, or people might not even notice it, but I really want that Let It Bleed, Give Me Shelter vibe to this thing. I want bleed, and I want dirt, and I want it to come out sounding like one foot on a tightrope and one foot on the deck of a boat. And he did it. So, I mean, his production in there is just beautiful sound wise. And there's not that many players on it. There's me on acoustic and harmonica and vocal, and Frank plays like banjo, electric, and bass. And then we got John Dedrick from Nashville playing keyboards. And of course we have the singers. So it's really a pretty stripped down record in the sense of, wanting to leave it sounding a little bit like it could be reproduced by a 4-piece, an angry 4-piece.
Well, and the fact that it's stripped down, I think, adds to what I was talking about the timelessness of it, and
Thank you.
Like certainly the writing is there, and the writing is timeless. And again, the unfortunate timelessness of a lot of it.
Unfortunate timelessness.
But I think certainly the production adds to that. It's just a beautiful record, Nathan.
Oh, thanks, man. I'm glad to hear that.
One of the songs that really, man, now it's coming again. I'm hearing myself. Damn. Check. Dude, I think that was on my end. I think you just did that for nothing.
I'm going to do it anyway.
I think I figured it out.
But I can hear better that way, so hold on.
Okay, cool. I'm such a dumbass.
That's okay, man. It's part of sound.
Yeah.
The fact that you admitted it means you're one of the rare guys that's a real sound man.
Yeah, real sound man. That's what they call me. You're probably the first musician to ever show up to an interview with me early, and I'm glad you did, because now we gotta figure this out.
I work for a living. I know how to do this.
All right, let's try it for a couple minutes. It may have actually. Okay. I'm sorry that it doesn't sound that. All right, let's try it. Let's see how it goes.
So are you not getting enough volume on my end?
No, the volume's great. There's like, now it sounds, right this moment sounds really good. But for a second there, I was getting static when you put the earpods in. But
that
now,
could have been I don't know what that would be about. Yeah. Are you getting it now?
No, now everything sounds good.
Okay, cool. Let's see what we can do.
Okay, so speaking of wrong man for the job, I'm not a sound man by any means, obviously, and that's the kind of the entry point, that song that I wanted to talk about. It's one of the few, maybe the only one. I think there might be one other song, just a couple other songs that don't have subtitles. Almost all of them have subtitles. But
they do. I didn't even thought about that. I'm looking at them right now. Yeah, you're right.
That was going to be one of my questions for you. Is if you did that on purpose?
Did I leave it as a song with no subtitles? Actually, I did, because. Actually, I made a bunch of author's notes about this for my radio guy in England.
Cool.
And because he wanted to know, what was I thinking with the songs? Because he was getting these questions back about where'd they come from. And I generally tend to think that whatever an author says about their stuff is wrong, including me. Because, once you put it out in the world, it's the interpretation of the listener. And they can just miss it completely of what you were trying to do, or they can pick up something you weren't trying to do that's in there. You got to give the listener the credit for being intelligent enough to hear the song the way they need to. And so I didn't want to do this, but I ended up doing it. And I kept it kind of tight. And underneath Wrong Man for the Job, I wrote, me, any right winger, your chosen deity, but you're the right man for the job. And so, in the Wrong Man for the Job, I didn't want to put anything in there to lead the listener at all.
Wow.
Because, what people don't know is they don't know what president I'm talking about. They assume Trump, right? Mm-hmm. They don't know if I'm an atheist or I just am pissed off about the way people talk about God, right? The first line is basically, I'm a lousy misogynist dude. Am I really? And of course, the only one in there that's just clear is that I'm wealthy and I'm not giving you any money. That's easy, right? But the others have for as utterly, to the point as they are, there's some room for interpretation. I haven't had a president in my lifetime that I really, really, really thought was everybody's president. I've admired certain people for certain things, but in my lifetime, has the president ever been the president of the entire United States? And I would argue that possibly Lyndon Baines Johnson was the only one to do that. Partly because he was a cantankerous bastard. And so if he thought something was right and had to be done, he went forward whether they liked him or not. And, you start talking about presidents, you get into a deep thing. But when I did Wrong Man for the Job, it was definitely Trump in my, in the foreground, because he's the wrong man for every job. I worked in the hotel industry in Boston in the early 80s. We already knew he was a shyster and a con man in the 80s, but he's the logical extension of Reagan. So I guess we got where we were going.
Well, of course, I thought you're talking about Trump as well, but also I was thinking about how, and again, one of the things I love about this record the most, it is the thing I love about this record the most, is that for whatever reason, for several reasons, it made me self-reflective about my own political beliefs, about my own my own feelings about mortality, these are things that I'm constantly thinking about anyway. Please don't misunderstand me. Like if everybody listening to the show is like, dude, whatever, you talk about this every episode, but I think this one brings it out, and you are able to express the things that I'm feeling in such a way that it made me even more self-reflective than I think I normally am at listening to great art that I love. And with this song took me to a specific place immediately.
That's interesting.
It took me to a conversation I was having with my buddy right after the Billy Bass, whatever that guy's name was, where Trump said the grab him by the pussy comment. And
oh yeah, the class, the cream of Hollywood.
Yeah. So it took me right to the moment that happened, and I was talking to my buddy, who is one of the few true, like, still on board with Trump people that I can be around, you know. And he's good for me because he forces me to go like, how is this man who otherwise is such a good person still in this cult? And I can't just dismiss him. You know, I have to be reflective about it, and it's really healthy for me. So anyway, I remember that moment, and this song just took me right there where I said to him, I was like, dude, seriously, like, everything aside, this guy, you think that character should be president? Like, forget everything. Just take that one moment, you know? And he said to me, he's like, man, in college, man, we used to say all kinds of stupid shit. And I was like, yeah, but in college, I was not qualified to be president of the United States. Like, how is this not so clear to you? And those kinds of moments showed up a lot in listening to this record, and specifically that particular song, the self-awareness of it, right? Like, I'm probably not the right man for a lot of different jobs, but this motherfucker.
Yeah, right. Well, that's an interesting way to put it, because, you know, there's this whole thing, and I don't know if you guys did it when you were younger. It doesn't translate well. But there used to be kind of a way of saying that you were just not worthy of somebody by saying, oh, of course they'd sleep with you. It was almost like self-deprecating. It was like, oh yeah, she'd sleep with me, but she wouldn't. And you knew it, right? And that was kind of your way of saying to your friends, I'm just a schmuck. That's not what Trump did. What Trump did was, and I'm talking about 19-year-old schmucks. I'm not talking about grown men who figure this shit out.
Right.
What Trump did was acquisitional, and that's who he is. Everything belongs to him. I mean, my theory is that if I had to bet money, my theory is that he's willing to do the cartel thing of sending you pictures of your family playing in the front yard and $10,000. So what do you want? You want the $10,000, or you want me to know where your family lives? And I feel like that he's that bad a guy. And I honestly think he's one of the most dangerous men ever born, because I don't think that there's anything he thinks is out of bounds to get something that makes him feel better than his dad ever let him feel. You know, so he's the wrong man for every goddamn job unless he has some epiphany. And that epiphany doesn't happen for non-reflective people. Yeah. You know, the only way he gets an epiphany is Mike Tyson style. He goes to jail for 12 years for doing something incredibly stupid, and finds out while he's in jail that he's not the guy he thought he was. And, you know, Tyson's still probably not the guy for the job either, but he's a lot closer than he was. It's clear, right? Yeah. And everybody, and some of those guys, like with him, you know, a lot of times the thing that lifts him out is a belief in something that, you know, something else, that, you know, being a Muslim, being a Christian, finding going to Mexico and doing some kind of jungle ritual. But that just replaces, right? That's a replacement. But Trump's incapable of that, as far as I can tell. He's not interested. He's just not interested. He's only wants one thing. And he found a bunch of those embarrassingly cowardly white men to tell him, and a few really stupid and embarrassing coward, not white people, but not many.
No, not many. Man,
that conversation, I live in the reddest red. So I have conversations with people that I think very highly of, and I'm just like, you voted Republican?
Yeah.
I mean, really?
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I think there were times when I promised myself I wouldn't just preach to the choir this whole conversation, but I think there are times when I like, when, you know, if it was a Paul Ryan Republican, right? Or a Mitt Romney Republican, I'd be like,
Yeah.
okay, I don't agree, and I don't like
Yeah.
that fucker, but it's just a different thing, it's a different breed. I was just talking
Well,
to a guy last
yeah.
night about that.
Well, it is a different breed, but the other thing is that breed was pretty bad. I mean, it's easy to forget that Reagan let tens of thousands and maybe more young gay men die.
Yeah.
Because he was in thrall to a bunch of people who, quite frankly, don't really deserve their space on this earth. And you have a responsibility when you're born in your one life you've got, not to damage other people. And we all damage people going through life by making mistakes. But I'm not talking about being rude or crude or stupid or insensitive or not noticing somebody you love's birthday by accident or something. I'm talking about not harming people. And this whole Republican thing, since Reagan, since Gingrich, since Ryan, since Cantor, they are happy to harm people. And in pursuit of, I think, money, I don't think anything else is on the table. I don't think they actually have a philosophy, which is why they eventually lose. The reason they eventually lose is you have to have a philosophy, because if you're going to get in the ring, you're going to get hit. And the only guys who win in the ring are the guys who know how to get hit, but they believe in what they're doing. There's no great boxer out there who only fights, ladies in wheelchairs, right?
Yeah.
You have to go do your thing. And these guys are like, they're like that kid in high school who shoots his mouth off for 3 years, and then the small guy hits him in the head, and that's the end of it.
Yeah.
And I don't like to go toward violence, but they believe that the fear of violence that people have, and the nervousness that people on the preaching to the choir side, and there's a reason that choir exists. We don't want violence. They may deserve it, but we don't want it. We don't want to be. I'm half Jewish. My grandfather came here from the Ukraine, and he was part Armenian. So I'm Armenian and Jewish on one side. I got the two of the worst possible options when it comes to pogroms, and people want to kill people.
Right.
So my grandfather came here, he set up his life. He's a great guy. He passed away before I was born, but he did a lot of amazing things. He built a life in America, and he loved America. And he wouldn't have wished for having to do what they were doing back in the Ukraine to stay alive. That's why he came here. He didn't come here because he didn't want to be killed. He came here because going out every day and dragging bodies back to the village and having to kill people to stay alive is no way to live. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, most of us are less afraid, if we're honest, of our own death than of taking another person's life, because that is a responsibility that then you have to carry. You're dead. You don't carry that, So, the choir is there because this is a choir that wants to feed people and lift people up. And the other side, they don't even have a choir. They got a really bad, like, yacht rock band. That's what they've got.
Yeah.
And, just doing covers of Huey Lewis tunes and not understanding that Huey was a good guy.
Man, the inverse of that, like, of the idea, so interesting that we're more afraid of, like, taking someone else's life or having that responsibility than of the end of our own life. Like, I think about that a lot from the other side of bringing a life into the world, and, like, responsibility of that. Like, people who are parents, I'm not a parent, but I look at people who are parents, I'm like, damn, y'all, like, that is such an enormous responsibility.
It's literally the most terrifying moment of your life combined with the most wonderful moment of your life. I have a 26-year-old son and a 23-year-old daughter. My father told me the famous Zen parable where the father goes to the house of the abbot, the monk, and knocks on the door, and he says, "I can't sleep. I haven't been able to sleep for weeks." And the monk says, "Why not?" And he says, "Well, I'm going to die. My son's going to die. His son's going to die. His son's going to die." And the monk says, "Would you rather have it a different way?" And right there is what happens when you have a child. For the first time in your life, I mean, nobody wants to die. It's a scary idea and everything. And if you're Jewish, you think about it a lot, right? That's the whole joke, right? You're not Jewish, are you? So nobody wants to die, but nobody can even imagine living with the death of their child. That is unimaginable. Only a psychopath can do that. And so you're right, man. The fear is like, And you don't want your kid to go out and have to take a life. You don't want your kid to live that life. We got these people on the right, they don't even know what the fuck they're talking about. Most of them never served. Most of them never stood in front of somebody, had to make that decision. Most of them weren't even volunteer firemen or cops or anything. They never, ever had to make that decision. And all this hubris that comes from them is shameful. So in case you can tell, I don't feel particularly strongly about this.
No, you've been pretty subtle so far, and real subtle on the record too.
No, not subtle at all.
Well, it's interesting, kind of tying that into the how the comment you made earlier about, and I think this is true for most songwriters that I talk to, at least. That like once it's out there, it's out there. Once you make the work and you put it out there, it's out there, and whatever it is for people is what it's going to be. Have you always felt comfortable with that idea that like once I've done this thing, it's out there, it's going to be what it's going to be?
Absolutely. But Jason, to some extent, and this is going to sound phony, but it's the truth, I haven't been successful enough to worry too much about it. It's not coming back at me like it would come back at me if I was Ed Sheeran. Ed Sheeran does Running on the Razor. He's going to have to answer a lot of questions. If he does Mossberg Blues, all the gun people are going to pop out and say, what does that song mean? But for me, I just kind of float along in this kind of little world that I'm in. And most of my listeners are pretty serious about the lyrics, which is not common either. So I do have people ask me questions, and I do have people come back with very odd interpretations. But I've never had anybody come back with a cynical one, and I've never had anybody come back with one that was so far out there. I was like, what song were you listening to? I've had people draw conclusions in what I call the Bob Dylan school of songwriting, which is a guy who figures out a whole bunch of stuff that couldn't possibly be in the song. I've had that happen. But it's always interesting what it is. It's like, oh, that's about a larva. No, it couldn't be less about a larva, but okay. Does that make you happy? Good.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I love that. The Bob Dylan school of songwriting.
Well, when I was a kid, I was the same way. I was like looking at Dylan lyrics going, those are pretty obvious, but everybody says there's more to them.
Yeah. I was always reading way more into it. I still read way more into them.
He likes that.
Yeah. So speaking of like not being Ed Sheeran, there's this kind of time in your life where you sort of stepped away from music, right? Like during that time, were you still like, were you able to feed that creative need and that creative outlet?
I don't know. I'm really a guy who the day before disappears almost immediately, and the day in front of me doesn't exist. I can plan something. Obviously, I was here a few minutes early, but I don't think about what's going to happen down the road. I just tend to walk through whatever door opens. And at the time, I was in Nashville, and it's a story that a lot of people like to tell as if Nashville was a horror show. It wasn't. It was. I met lots of people there I like. They're nice people, but co-writing doesn't suit me. And co-writing is a business decision. If you co-write, more people get a piece of the pie. If you let people in on the pie, they want to write with you, and then you have the pie starts growing. I, with the exception of the songwriter Craig Bickhart, and we do things a little oddly. I send him lyrics, or we kind of do stuff separately and then meet together. With the exception of Craig, Angelina Presley from who's like Americana and really, really wonderful writer. With the exception of those two people, I don't co-write, and I didn't co-write much even with them. So I didn't fit the business model, and it took me about 2 weeks to figure that out. And I had a 1.5-year contract, and I had a record deal not a record deal. I had a production deal with Richard Bennett, who did Guitar Town, right? Steve Earle's Guitar Town.
Yeah.
So we were making a record, and so it's sort of like when you're in the middle of it, you're doing it, you don't pull out. But as soon as it was clear to me the record wasn't going to be picked up by anybody, and my publisher was only becoming more and more dissatisfied with me, I just decided to pack it in. And I packed it in for 2 reasons. I packed it in for one thing. I wanted my family life. My father was my father passed away last year. He had a chance in the mid-'70s probably springboarded from years he'd spent rubbing shoulders with all the right people to kind of be a big deal. And his first book won a Lamont Award, which is for first book of poetry, and really hard to win. And he had a chance to kind of do the New York circuit and the San Francisco circuit and all. But he told my mother, he said, if I do that, I can't watch basketball games at night. I can't do the things I like to do. So he went back and he taught at the University of Iowa for 44 years. And, a workshop there was a big deal, but he could have been a bigger deal. But he made this choice. I don't like that part of it either. I don't handle hanging out at parties very well. I'm an introvert. I'm an introvert in that way. And so I want to go home and watch baseball and basketball games. I'm a huge soccer fan, and now finally I can watch it. So do I want to be not watching Champions League? Yeah, shit, man, I want to watch Champions League. I can still write songs. So in 1992, 93, when my contract came up with the publisher, I made that decision to go make a living. And I went and worked at a bunch of different really awful jobs because I don't have a college degree. And then I ended up accidentally in cell phones. And the thing just friggin' blew up in 1995. Cell phones just went through the roof. And I kind of got a free ride there. And I was with Bell South Mobility and ended up a market manager down here in Chattanooga, and kind of overcame my lack of a college education to get right to where I would have been anyway with a master's.
Wow.
So for about 19 years, and 13 of those I managed people. I don't know if I replaced the creative part with managing people, but it was so satisfying and enjoyable that I didn't think about it.
Oh, wow.
And I went back to what I used to do, which is sit around, listen to jazz to relax and listen to what I really love. And the other reason that I stopped playing was I wasn't writing what I wanted to write, and I didn't know why. Wow. And I couldn't fix it. And there were people who really liked what I was doing. I didn't like it. I was struggling with it. I wrote 2 or 3 songs in that time period that still hang around. King of the North, song called I Would Be a Blackbird, but not much more. And there was something missing. And what was missing was me getting old and me working in these jobs and me becoming the person that I always wanted to write like, and to write about the people I wanted to write like, and I hadn't spent enough time around them. I'd worked my whole life as a kind of a grunt worker because I didn't go to college. And I learned a lot from those people. But once I worked in the corporate world and saw what it takes to be a working guy in the world, then all of a sudden, when my wife kind of conned me into playing again, Don Henry, the songwriter, and my wife are responsible for all of this. So if you're out there going, dude, you should have stayed out of the business, it's their fault. And Don Henry had me come to a show, and he said, why don't you come out and play a couple songs? I literally hadn't picked up a guitar to play any songs in 13 years.
No way.
Yeah, I picked up the guitar twice. One time at a party at a friend's house where this ostentatious and pretentious doctor was talking guitars all the time. And I just said, let me see that guitar, and ripped off like the fastest thrash shit I ever could do and handed it back to him, said, it's okay. And stopped. The whole table went, and then one time I was hanging out with one of my managers, and I said, hey, you want to have some fun? And we were right near a Guitar Center, and I went in and I started to play Smoke on the Water. At first I kind of detuned the A string, and then I played Smoke on the Water until they made me leave. So, I was out of it, man. I didn't want to do it. But I played 2 songs at Don's show, and I sucked. And I was like, man, you suck. You can't sing, you can't play. It was weird. I remembered the lyrics, but I was like, God, you're bad. And I went home and I started thinking, that can't stay. This cannot stand, right out of, what's the line from Big Lebowski?
This aggression will not stand, man.
Yeah, I was like, this will not stand, man. So I went and started screwing around with the guitar again, and my wife kind of caught on. And so I went up to a business meeting, and I came back in this closet we had that was big for a closet, but small for a studio, with a slanted roof. You can sit in it and stand on half of it. Everything was out of it. And there was a desk, a guitar, and a stand, pad of paper. And she said, you got to start doing this again. And I was like, really? I didn't expect that. So I wrote a song called Used Cars, which is actually pretty good. I just never used it. And slowly but surely started becoming a beginner again. I started writing songs about what I wanted to write. And then I wrote 4 albums that are the Family Man. I don't know what you call it. 4. Quad. What would you call it?
I don't know. There's got to be a name. Let's make one up.
It's a four song sequence, a four CD
Four-pack.
sequence. Yeah, that's what it is. A 4-pack, and they're all songs for the most part about, you know, getting through the world as a not particularly I don't know. Like, it's not an album about thoughts. It's an album about actions. The first one and the second one and the third one and the fourth one. And each one kind of builds on the others. So when I got to this record, I had kind of cleared the decks. I was ready to write something else. And it all just kind of came together. I don't know. I look at this record and I think this record is a sort of a summation of 10 years of me stumbling my way back into writing. So, wow. You know, and I stand by the other songs, but this thing, there's something, it's got that thing where you got the knife out and you cut everything off and until it was just the thing. So I guess it's my Rodin. I don't know.
That's so beautiful. All of that's beautiful. I love it. I love all of that. So you're living in the moment person. You're not thinking about the future necessarily. Can I challenge you a little bit to think about the future though? Are you still in the habit of writing? And do you think there's another record, you know, in a year or two, or do you even have that written maybe since you've been doing all that work?
There's 21 songs that haven't been recorded.
Okay.
I mean, my father used to say, and my father and I are very similar, or were very similar. And we both wrote and never thought of writing and the business as the same thing. You know, you write. If you write, you write. If nobody ever sees it, nobody ever gives a shit about it, you still wrote it. And that's what I tell my guitar students. I say, you can play that guitar in your room for the rest of your life. A perfectly legitimate way to play the guitar. You don't ever have to go on stage. Whatever it gives you, it gives you. You can write 1,000 words every day and never publish them. Doesn't matter. Now, when you want it out there in public, you have to accept the fact that there's a quality bar, you know, and that's one of the things that's happened with the internet is the quality bar has been adjusted a few times. You know, and there's a lot of really bad songwriting out there, but it serves the purpose of the person doing the writing. I would never say it to their face. I would never call them out. You know, I would say, look, it must mean something to you. I wouldn't put it on YouTube 3 days after I wrote it when I'd been writing for an entire 6 weeks, but you did, and you have the right to do it. So, yeah, I write all the time. I'll probably never stop writing. I've got it's been a rough year because of my father's passing, and I'm handling some things, including I'm sort of coming up to where I'm going to have to deal with his literary estate. And that's a whole nother animal, man. That's like, I have boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes of stuff that may be viable for, you know, the unpublished works of. But, you know, I look at it and go, I'm going to lose a year to that. And my old man would be like, don't do it. Honest to God, when he was dying, he said to me, just throw all this shit out. I said, yeah, sure. I'll throw it all out. You know, I'll throw every bit of it out. Don't worry. I'm burning it now, Dad. But, you know, he didn't want anybody to be inconvenienced. But there's a lot there. There's a lot of real interesting stuff there. So I've got the 21 songs. Will I write another 20 songs this year? Seems unlikely. But I did write the title track. It is in process of being written right now because it was an unusual year. And I think that it's actually going to be kind of a logical successor to this album. Weirdly enough, you know, political music is a rough sell. And it's a rough sell to the average person because the average person, you know, whatever happened in the 2 or 3 days of their last life is how they feel, you know? And it's hard to find people who think of this Sinclair Lewis. Like the Sinclair Lewis thing's been mentioned multiple times with this record, and I could not be more flattered. I mean, the jungle's a big part of my, no, that's Upton Sinclair. Upton Sinclair has also been mentioned. So Upton Sinclair, Sinclair Lewis. It's easy at my age to take Sinclair twice there, by the way. And so I get this. I get where it's coming from. Somebody else said that it was the musical Gulag Archipelago. And I was like, oh, man, whoa. I read that book when I was 13 and it put me into shock.
Hey, once it's
So
out there, man, you can't
yeah,
control
you
it.
can't stop it. It's a feel-good record all the way.
Well, there are some feel-good moments, that's for sure. Like
There are
and also being able to say motherfuckers over and over again is pretty fun.
many times. We call that infamous track number 9. And everyone asks about it. They say, well, you did on track number 9. I said, yeah, I know it's got it going on, not going on the radio. And what I think is really cool is that Aubrie Sellers sang on it.
I was just going to mention that.
We were like, we'll never find anybody to sing on this thing. And I knew Aubrie has a mutual friend of mine, Ethan Ballinger, who's a stone cold genius. So I sent Ballinger a thing and said, I need somebody to sing on this track. And I sent it to him, and I'm waiting for the go fuck yourself, right? She's not going to ruin her career for this. And I did say in the email, I said, probably not a lot of people will hear it. So, but so he said, oh no, man, she really digs it. I was like, and then she killed it. Like she gave it that little bit of extra Appalachian fuck you sauce that made it even more like it's like going to an Appalachian town, singing a song, and some guy walks up and goes, fuck you. I mean, that's how the song works, right? So
I feel like that's your money-making opportunity, is selling that Appalachian fuck you sauce.
Dude, you're not kidding, man. Let me write that down. Yeah. God, if you got the right Scoville scale on it, somebody'd buy it.
For real.
Like, man, this is the hottest hot sauce I ever had, man.
It's that Appalachian fuck you.
This is the only thing anyone's going to remember my entire career, man.
Hey, but if they remember it, right? And then they'll come
People
back.
People are going to be on like Instagram going, oh, the dude's dead. Remember Appalachian fuck you sauce?
Did you know he was a writer too?
Yeah, the guy had a career. We didn't know it was just a hot sauce. We thought he was a hot sauce mogul. Yeah, that's funny stuff, man.
And Aubrie is outstanding on that, and she's just I've never met her, but I have had her collaborating partner Jade Jackson. They've got such a cool project. Jade's been on my show.
They do.
And they've got such a cool thing going. I'm going to Americana Fest, and I'm really excited to catch them and hopefully get to meet her. But you've got some incredible voices on here. In addition to her, you've got Regina McCrary, and you've got the wonderful Patti Griffin on there.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that? Like working with Patti fucking Griffin? Like I'm
sitting with Frank, and I go, listen, man, I know Patti doesn't really sing on other people's records, but she'd be perfect for American Gun. And he goes, yes, she would. And Frank knows her. So one day I'm home, because we're doing everything long distance after that, right? And I'm like, I recorded all the vocals with drummer Alvino Bennett, who's a freak. He's so good. And we recorded that with like 2 and 3 takes, nothing more than that. And then I added the harps and my acoustic parts, and then I went home. And Frank started working on a record, throwing shit back and forth. Brian Brinkerhoff, the other producer on it, calls me. He texts me one day, and I said, hey, did you ever ask Frank about Patti? And I'm expecting, right? Nah. And I'm like, cool with it. Like, sure. She's one of the few songwriters that I just think never got enough attention, as much as she got. She's a great songwriter. There's a couple of lines in there, that song that starts out, Big Chief walking up and down the road. That is like a perfect song. That's a Hemingway short story. And so Brian sends back the text message. Oh yeah, we're just waiting on her to get the vocals back to us. And I'm like, wow. What'd she sing on? American Gun? He goes, yeah. And she also sang on To Each of Us and
A Lucky Man.
A Lucky Man. And I was like, so I go into my wife and I go like, hey Leslie, Patti Griffin's singing on the album. And she looks at me and she like doesn't register. And she goes, oh, that's nice. And she goes back to doing what she's doing. I'm like, that's going to hit her. It's like, comes in later and she goes, Patti Griffin? I said, yeah. I said, it's nice to be that's going to be cool. And they were even better vocals than you could imagine. They were that thing she does where she's like, it's always there and it's tight, but it's always there. It's her singing. Does the same thing Emmy Lou does, which is kind of float in a place where, and Aubrie does that too. She sits in a spot where you hear Aubrie Sellers singing, but she doesn't distract from the connectivity. And then Regina McCrary. I mean, if you want sexy, you get a gospel singer, man. It's just, she's on Retread Cadillac. I just sat there it takes a lot for me to fall out of a chair. And Frank sent me that, and I was like on the floor, literally on the floor going, I don't deserve this. This is better than any 61-year-old dude who grew up in Iowa deserves, you know?
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah. And it's just like, they made the record to me, and there's not a lot of background vocals on it. So you really notice it when they pop in.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of that song, Retread Cadillac, I just think that's one of my favorites on the record too. It's just front to back full of great songs. I mean, there's not one that even sort of misses. But that one,
man,
just
that's
like
great.
the sort of the imagery of it, like you can just picture like Lightning Hopkins there with the woman on each arm and the whole bit, right? Like you really transport the listener to this world there.
Oh, that's wonderful, man. Thank you.
You're welcome. Something that you said earlier I wanted to return to, and we don't usually talk about like management here, but you kind of like had a little bit of a lightness to your voice almost when you were talking about how you enjoyed managing people and being a manager, and leadership is hard and being a manager is hard. And I wonder, like, you did it for a long time, if you learned lessons, or if there's anything you can impart.
Yeah. Well, the previous full band album, which I did with Missy Rain's band, and that included Ethan and Billy Strings, mandolin player right now, and a bunch of cats that could really play. And that record kind of was the record that got me rolling in Europe and the UK. And it was called "I Don't Do This for Love, I Do This for Love." Yeah. Which was really, and it was about working. The whole album's about working, and there's different kinds of love, right? There's what I learned managing people, and I made my share of mistakes. And when the mergers all started in cell phones, things got really weird. And there are people who probably walked out of that company hating my guts because I couldn't do something to make their landing better or their life better. And it tore me up too. It actually was one of the hardest times of my life. I had a lot of people work for me in a field where there's a lot of turnover. I didn't have any. And I didn't have any because at the end of the day, people want to work for a company, go home, enjoy their lives. They don't want to have to be devoted to the company. They don't want to think of the company as their friend. They don't think the company's there for them, because let's face it, dude, the company's not there for you. Not one single company, not your father's company. None of it's fucking there for you. If you're not making the living for those people, you're on your goddamn ass. And because of that, I treated them like they were valuable. I didn't ask them to hang around and do the rah-rah shit. I took a lot of crap for that from corporate, but we made money for them. We were a satellite market. They weren't looking at us most of the time. And when the books came in, we looked good. So success makes things a lot easier. And I had a lot of conversations I didn't want to have with people, but I was able to have them honestly because we were doing well and they knew the rules. And, it wasn't until the merger started and things started to get weird that I would look at it and say that responsibility became unpleasant. I mean, I guess I was arrogant enough to think I could hold off the corporate guys over here. And that my duty was to the people who worked for me and made the money that I took home. And, there are a lot of managers like that. It wasn't just me. There's other guys who think that way. So after being around all these people who went to work every day, single moms, I had a lot of single mothers working for me. And the reason that single mothers weren't working for people before was that they couldn't go home when their kid was sick. Well, I'm not stupid. I don't want to have to do their job. So yeah, they can go home when their kid is sick because I don't want to have to replace them every time something goes wrong. It's just selfishness. I want to watch the basketball game at the end of the day. I don't want to be out there covering all the shit that I made miserable. So, I enjoyed it. I saw people have families while I was there because I was there long enough. I saw people get married and divorced and married and divorced and married and divorced. I mean, we're near enough to Gatlinburg that I really did see people get married and divorced. It was a wonderful time. And then when I came back to writing, I was on the way out of it. But when I started to write about people, I had all these people I'd met. I knew about their lives and their lives were valuable and interesting. And, I will say that I'm one of the few songwriters that writes about work who actually worked for 45 years. It doesn't happen very often anymore. In order to be a songwriter, you got to spend so much time on being a songwriter, being a musician, that you can't work a 40, 45 hour a week job. And I worked 50, 60 hour a week jobs. So when I started writing about these folks, it was coming right from day to day, the language. And, you know, it was an advantage as a writer. For the first time in my life, I knew what I was talking about.
Man, that's great. Nathan, this has been such a pleasure. We usually,
it's been fun, man.
Yeah, good. I'm glad. We usually end on the art that's inspired, what you're getting down on, the art that's inspiring you right now. Like, what are you watching or listening to? Or
right now? Well, I've been watching Ted Lasso, and I can put up with some of the fact that the football when they have to play it is terrible and slow, because otherwise it's pretty good. And I've been working on, I need a chant. I'm going over to Scotland in a week, and I need my own chant, because, you know, it's like, he's here, he's there, he's every fucking where. Roy Kent is about as good as it gets. And I sort of came up with, his lyrics are inspiring. No, his lyrics are insightful. His music is delightful. I forgot what the rest of it goes. He's something fucking shameful. And I don't know. I can't come up with it. But that's, you know, that kind of stuff. And I listen to a ton of jazz. I guess I'm secretly a guy who couldn't play it and really wishes he could. You know, I think too much when I play it, so I've walked away from it in the sense that I could fake it pretty good, but I didn't know I was faking it. So I listen to a ton of jazz, and right now I'm wearing out my James Blood Ulmer records. So do you know who he is?
I don't know him. No. James
Blood Ulmer, strangest cat. He invented this thing called harmonic guitar, and it's like Ornette Coleman, but not quite as melodic.
Okay.
And and I've also been going back. I bought the collected 45 singles of Sun Ra, and I've been going through those. And I don't tend to listen to songwriters, and that's only because it's what I do, and so I think of it critically, and I don't want to do that. I'd rather show up at a show that I split with them and dig their songs than spend my time listening to them and analyzing why the song works, the song doesn't work. So I live in the jazz world. I'm reading. I always read a lot. I'm kind of going back through, like, if it's a Booker Prize book, you know, I'll jump on it. And I've gone back a little bit to, I got this urge to read Jack London again. And, you know, so that's where I'm at, and you know, picking up heavy objects. That's
so funny, man. Just Call of the Wild sitting right next to It Can't Happen Here on the shelf.
Well, you know, it's I have every London book in another room. This room's been stripped because my mother's coming down to live with us, and this is going to be her house. So I've been spending my time on that process of getting that taken care of, and being my own contractor. And so I got a whole nother album coming up about being a contractor, but people would be bored by it because it would just be me yelling "fuck" at the top of my lungs for an hour and a half, like performance art or Yoko Ono, just unleashed. Fuck!
Appalachian, fuck you, sauce.
Fuck! It's Monday. Fuck! It's Tuesday. Fuck! The guy showed up without his helper, and I have to move everything. Fuck! Yeah, that's the album.
Oh, that's great, man. I'm looking forward to the Fuck album and
the Fuck hot sauce.
Fuck sauce, fuck album.
If I do a T-shirt, man, I'll cut you in.
Yes, awesome.
You deserve it.
Thanks. Well, dude, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much. Thank you for the record.
It's a pleasure.
For your time. It's been so great.
Well, be my guest if there's any follow-up questions that might be answered more easily without the great hilarity we've experienced.
All right.
I enjoyed it, man, very much. I look forward to meeting you someday.
Likewise. Thank you. Have a great night.
Be happy, man. Talk to you later.
See ya.
They weigh less than a few thoughts and prayers when they die underneath the American blue. Tribe freezes themselves to the bulldozers. My car starts every morning in the dead of winter. There are people chained to machines everywhere with the American blues. Somebody built a fountain named it the Trail of Tears. Children laugh and run through the water in the sweltering heat. None of us have the heart to tell them the original story of the American blues. We are taking our lives one day at a time, with bullets and useless poetry. Soon we will be burning together in red, white, and American blues.
Nathan Bell, y'all. Thank you so much, Nathan. I don't think I've said the word fuck that much on record in my entire life. It felt good to talk with a like-minded person whose record I respect so much. The song you're hearing in this episode is called American Blues off that same album. NathanBellMusic.com for all things Nathan, including physical copies of Red, White, and American Blues. It can happen here. I'm telling you, listen to the record, get a copy. It's one of my favorite things I've heard this year. It's one of the records that has excited me unlike much else has in a long time, and that's high praise because there's been a lot of records that I've been fired up about both this year and in recent years. So I don't say that lightly. NathanBellMusic.com. The record's called Red, White, and American Blues. It can happen here. MarinadePodcast.com for all things the Marinade, including written pieces, photography, our online store, and more. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter if Instagram still exists. Today, Facebook and Instagram went down, so if it continues to exist, follow us over there. If not, no big deal. Please join Twitter if you're not over there anyway. It's better. Give us a follow and a 5-star rating on your podcast app. These are all free ways to support the show. If you really like what we're doing, please consider joining our Patreon community, where for just a few bucks a month, you can gain access to Patreon exclusive content like our show Jason's Journey, where I talk about the moments that shape my creative life and provide a window into the process of making the Marinade. Sometimes we get together for Patreon happy hours. We recently dropped a special, Jason's Journey, with singer and songwriter and photographer and podcaster, multi-talented individual Will Payne Harrison. Our Patreon, y'all, funds a lot. It pays for the overhead for the show, but also, for example, I went to Americana Fest in Nashville. I got to meet Will in person. I got to meet Van Plating in person. I got to meet a lot of folks that I had only previously known online, in face to face, and I got to see some amazing artists and interview amazing artists. And then this past weekend, I went to Tampa and I got to see some incredible music there, and I'll be writing about it. And I didn't get to catch up with anybody in Gasparilla, but I did take some photos, and I'll share some stories. So all that's possible because of the Patreon. So if you can swing it, that's awesome. Thank you. Come join us. Plus, it's a lot of fun. But above all, regardless, just thank you for listening. It's still free to listen. Spreading the word is free. Thank you so much for telling friends about the show. Thank you so much for every retweet or like that you give us on social media. Sharing stuff on your Instagram stories, those things make a big difference. Maybe sharing something on Facebook since we're not over there. Those things make a difference. So thank you so much, above all, for just listening and spreading the word. All right, y'all, it's time for our Review Under 2, the segment where I review an album, performance, film, some singular creation that is inspiring me at the moment. For a longer list of what I'm getting down on, you can join the Patreon for as little as $2 a month. And each episode, I'll release a longer list of what I'm fired up about. For today, I'm honored to bring you my Review Under 2 of Bendigo Fletcher's Americana Fest performance and their record Fits of Laughter, a 2-in-1. Louisville, Kentucky is the Istanbul of the South, a town at the crossroads of East and Midwest, a place suited to spawn My Morning Jacket, Muhammad Ali, Hot Browns, and Louisville Sluggers. A city proud of its heroes and icons. Louisville is a southern town and a midwestern town. It is country and cosmopolitan, edgy with an insistence on being refined. Above all, Louisville is one of the jewels of Kentucky, a state whose pride in its creative contributions to American culture could never be overinflated. While those icons endure, a new generation carries on the legacy while forging their own trace. In furtherance of that lofty tradition stands Bendigo Fletcher, a band whose music is the feeling of first acceptance after a tough breakup, of the promise that a jarring and unexpected decision brings. Bendigo Fletcher's Fits of Laughter is an album drunk with familiar sounds melding in the mind to create the buzz of a sunny Sunday afternoon in the fall. as they take the stage at Americana Fest's 2021 Commonwealth of Kentucky Showcase. A group of 20-somethings makes their way to the front of the crowd. For the next all too short 30 minutes, they are all of us who have fallen for this band. Ryan Anderson's lyrics spanning from party anthem worthy to ruminations on existence and communing with nature. The sounds from Bendigo Fletcher's tight group of players running through myriad soundscapes to create a sound that is both mature and fresh. King Coomer, who played drums with Uncle Tupelo and Earle Wilco, produced Fits of Laughter. His influence on the record is clear. Anderson described their partnership as natural. They'd began working together by talking about the music that they loved. To hear Anderson talk about the process makes it sound like a joy, and joy is the emotion Bendigo Fletcher's Fits of Laughter evokes. From the 20-something folks dancing and singing every lyric right up front, to the music journalists twice their age sporting a grin wide as the Cumberland Gap, Bendigo Fletcher's record Fits of Laughter and their performance at Americana Fest 2021 ignites joy in all who listen. All right, y'all, that's my review under 2 of Bendigo Fletcher's Americana Fest performance and their record Fits of Laughter. Go check them out. Thank all of y'all so much for listening. Thank you again to Nathan Bell for sitting down with us and sharing so much of your time and energy. Until next time, go out and create something. Cheers, y'all.